lovely good morning and welcome to the Camnet Breakfast Show Wednesday edition, governance, policy and politics, rather, with me, Patrick Soko, and my co-host, Marco Kwakozi. Together, we'll be with you up the hour of 9. We have a fully packed program lined up just for you, our dear viewers. Later on the program, we'll be opening up the phone lines in case you want to get interacting with us in studio. And today, we are also looking at issues pertaining to debt restructuring, and we're going to have a guest from the UPND Alliance to help us discuss this issue on their perspective. Cozy.
Very interesting topic that we are looking at today, issues pertaining to debt restructuring. And as Patrick has said, we are going to be talking to somebody as regards that very particular topic, just to get to understand, because this topic has come with a lot of a school of thoughts that are different as regards this particular topic. Some people think this is there's nothing to celebrate about this particular topic. Others think this is a milestone and it will give the country some breathing space. But we are going to be discussing that a little later on. Patrick, very interesting morning today. Yesterday, Muzala Samkonga again at it. He won the Golden Spike in the race he took part yesterday. This gentleman has been making us proud.
Indeed, he has been making us proud. He's doing all the great things. It's been a while. We had a champion in the name of Zambia, and we are seeing we are producing one, and that is commendable. And we just want to urge him to soldier on and continue to do the country proud, and so that we can also be likened to those competitive nations in terms of athletics. And just now, let's get to look at our first segment, which is the Health Corner, and we'll be back. Keep it on Camnet.
Hi, good morning and welcome to the Health Corner here on the Breakfast Show. I am Dr. Nakubiana Mfaya. So today we're going to talk about the signs and symptoms of cervical cancer. This week we have been talking about cervical cancer, and we want to understand what are some of the signs and symptoms. How can you know that you have cervical cancer? Now, there are different signs and symptoms, and sometimes people who have this condition might not have these symptoms, and so you might be asymptomatic, and you may only discover it at the hospital when they are checking for something else. And so it's important that you do screening for cervical cancer if you are 21 years and above. You need to make sure that you do your screening at least every 3 years. So how can you know that you have cervical cancer, or what are some of the signs and symptoms? Number one is that you might experience what we call postcoital bleeding. And this is a bleeding that occurs once or after having sexual intercourse. And so you might experience that whenever you have sexual intercourse, you end up bleeding after the sexual intercourse is done. Or you might also experience what we call dyspareunia. And this is where you feel pain, or you have pain when you are having sexual intercourse. Other symptoms include abnormal uterine bleeding, where you are bleeding in between your periods. And so you might find that even after your periods are over, maybe in between, before the next period, you end up bleeding again. Sometimes it might be heavy bleeding, sometimes it might just be very little bleeding called spotting. So depending on how severe the condition is. The other symptoms include having menorrhagia. So you might experience that you have very severe menstrual bleeding. Whenever you have your menstrual periods, your bleeding is very heavy. If the cervical cancer has spread to other parts of the body, You might also experience other symptoms such as a back pain or having a cough, because maybe the cancer has spread to the bones or to the respiratory system, which is the lungs. So these are some of the signs and some of the symptoms that one experiences when they have a cervical cancer. The other symptom that I have forgotten to mention is that you might experience a discharge from the vagina. Sometimes it might be watery, and other times it might be a bit bloody, so you might notice a brownish or a reddish discharge from your vagina. Sometimes this discharge may actually have a very strong smell or a very bad odor, and so look out for any discharge that you might have, any abnormal discharge that you might have, and make sure you get yourself checked if you notice anything abnormal from your vagina. So if you have any abnormal bleeding, any abnormal discharge, if you have pain whenever you are having sexual intercourse, or if you bleed after having sexual intercourse, then you need to get checked and make sure that you get tested in the hospital to check if you have cervical cancer or if you are at risk of having or developing cervical cancer. So these are some of the signs and symptoms. I do hope you have learned something. Today we talked about the signs and symptoms of cervical cancer, and we say that cervical cancer can present with bleeding after intercourse, which is postcoital bleeding, or it could present with pain during intercourse, or abnormal uterine bleeding where you bleed in between your periods, or abnormal discharge where you have a discharge that is not normal. It can be watery or it can be reddish brownish. It can also have a different smell or a bad odor, and so you need to be able to look out for those symptoms. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time.
Thank you very much. So that was our health corner this morning, talking about cervical cancer, symptoms of cervical cancer. So if you are presenting any of those symptoms that have been talked about this morning, make sure that you visit your nearest health center just to make sure that you start the treatment on time. Cancer issues, very, very important to make sure that it's diagnosed early.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you are diagnosed early, the chances of you recovering are high compared to when you let it go into worse stages. It becomes difficult to treat. So it is important that you take a proactive approach in terms of going for screening, and that's for cervical cancer screening. You have to make sure that you are checked after some time, because this is a manageable disease in Zambia. In that there has been a lot of dedicated efforts to just make sure that cervical cancer is combated in the country. But it is among diseases which we do not pay attention to as a country, pertaining to just like other diseases that are such as, for instance, non-communicable diseases. We hardly pay attention to such diseases. But if you look at, for example, HIV, the COVID-19, malaria, so most of the times we do pay attention to that, but sometimes we forget that there is TB. So by cervical cancer, we need to make sure that we are proactive. Just like us as men, what affects us is prostate cancer mostly. So we have to also make sure that we go for screening to avoid us detecting that at the late stages, and we are able to be treated if it is diagnosed on time. So I hope you did manage to learn one or two things there from Dr. Mufaya pertaining to cervical cancer.
So thank you very much. That was our first segment, and we were talking cervical cancer. We get into the next segment, and now we are going to be looking at how the kwacha is performing against other major currencies, and this is the 28th of June 2023 as updated at 0707. So the kwacha against the South African rand is trading at buying at 93 kwacha and selling at 94 kwacha. So that's against the South African rand, and the euro is at 18 kwacha 77 and selling at 19 kwacha 14. And then the US dollar is at 17 kwacha at 10 ngwe and selling at 17 kwacha 44. And the Great British Pound is going at 21 kwacha 80 ngwe and selling at 22 kwacha 23 ngwe. So those are the rates as compiled this morning. Now remember that these rates will change bureau to bureau. Interesting.
You were trying to make the rand and the kwacha very expensive. 90 kwacha 0.93 there's 0.93 kwacha then and selling on 0.94 kwacha. The Zambian rand and the South African the Zambian kwacha and the South African rand, they trade like twins. They are always within the range.
Sure.
They compete with each other.
Sure.
And but against the dollar, they are trailing, and we are just seeing that we are on that trajectory. We just hope that measures will continue to be put in place to just make sure that we have a strong and stable currency, and that is important for business and also just economic matters. It is vital that we have a strong and resilient currency.
The kwacha against the dollar has performed, this month has performed between 18 and 17 and 18, 17 and 18. It's a good sign when we come to the issue of fuel, because it is a monthly review. We are hoping that maybe the price will remain stable or slightly go down.
Yeah, like you're saying, and we are approaching that part of the month when we have to look at the Energy Regulation Board, ERB, and them being able to announce the new price fares. So we just hope that this time around it will be maintained like you are assuming, because or reduced further, because that is good for motorists, that is good for commuters, it is good for the economy and transporters in general. So we just hope that a stable currency will continue to be maintained as it is, as opposed to 21. It was at 21 at some point in 20.
Sure.
We were looking at it, but we have had, I think this is market sentiments that are contributing to this stable currency. We are seeing that Zambia was able to get a debt restructuring deal, and that also means that there is quite a investor confidence on Zambia, and that is a positive sign when it comes to economic fortunes. So we just hope that authorities will continue to put in place some measures that aim at strengthening the currency. Talking about strengthening the currency, we cannot talk about that if we do not talk about production, which is if we are productive as a country, that translates into maximize the exports. And talking about exports, we're looking at beyond the traditional exports like copper. We are looking at other traditional exports that we can be able to trade as a country. For example, maize and other agricultural commodities. If we maximize on such, then it means that we are going to have more forex that is going to help us stabilize our currency. But if we're going to be importing more than we are exporting, then the kwacha will continue to be under severe pressure. So we just hope that that matter will be addressed and make sure that we have a strong and resilient currency over time. That is vital for us as a country. Now, interesting enough, now let's also look at other segment. On our segment now, we look at stories. We tend to zoom in the stories that are making the headlines, and we get so that we can get to understand and unpack them. These are the stories that were making the headlines in the Camnet main news, And we can start with this story pertaining to the civil society organizations. That Debt Alliance has urged the Zambian government to be transparent and consultative as they begin engagement with the private sector. Addressing the press in Lusaka Tuesday, Alliance chairperson Father Alex Muyebe says the debt restructuring agreement calls for more hard work among Zambians. He says the successful restructuring of the debt should not promote laziness, but should be used as an opportunity to improve the country's economy. Meanwhile, non-governmental gender organization coordinating council NGOCC programs manager Eileen Mukete says Zambia risks going back to unsustainable debt levels if the government does not step up efforts towards unlocking sectors that can help contribute towards domestic resource mobilization. So let's get to look at that story, and we also have another story where Finance Minister and National Planning Dr. Stumbeko Msokotwane has explained that the debt restructuring accorded to Zambia will, among other things, provide significant debt relief through the maturity extension of the existing claims by more than 12 years with a final maturity in the year 2043. So let's get to look at that story, and we'll be back on the other side.
Unsustainable debt levels reached by the Zambian government in the last 10 years has led to high taxes, put upward pressure on real interest rate, which has crowded out private investment, thereby putting pressure on the local currency and subsequently leading to high prices of goods and services, which has been felt by all citizens regardless of their geographical location. The announcement by the Zambian government that it has reached a debt restructuring deal with the creditors to have about 6.3 billion United States dollars restructured has brought some relief on the country whose budget was mostly being constrained by debt. The civil society organization Debt Alliance has however urged the Zambian government going forward to be transparent and consultative as they begin engagements with the private creditors.
The CSO Debt Alliance believes that this agreement not only supports Zambia's IMF program, but also paves way for reducing Zambia's risk of debt distress to moderate status, ultimately leading to long-term debt sustainability. The Debt Alliance understands that the bulk of work that lies ahead before signing the Memorandum of Understanding with official creditors. Hence, we urge the government to be transparent and consultative as they begin engagements with the private creditors.
Meanwhile, the non-governmental gender organization coordinating council NGOCC programs manager Irene Muketa says all the gains made will amount to nothing if government does not step up efforts towards unlocking sectors that can help contribute towards domestic resource mobilization.
It speaks to the issues of fiscal discipline, because if we were going to be in this mood of kind of celebrating to say, no, we've achieved this deal and we now have maybe more to spend, it will just take us into other issues which may land us into other problems. So I think it's a moment for us to just go back and plan better.
These programs that they're embarking on, the complexity and the detail, and so we become the bridge between government and the constituency, who are the citizens that we work with and we work for. So it's important that we are also part and parcel of the process, so government to create those spaces for us to be able to engage.
Others who spoke at the same meeting have called on the Zambian government to avail the conditionalities attached to the agreement, as well as the MOU that Zambia will sign with the official creditors.
The agreement is not a debt cancellation agreement. It's a debt restructuring agreement, which means that it only offers us temporal breathing space, allowing us to first of all grow the economy, raise enough revenues, and then begin to pay back the money that we are owing.
We do not want to inherit debt. That is why we urging government to ensure that we even come up with a local resources mobilization strategy, so like a plan B, so that we can pay this debt as quickly as possible.
For now, one only hopes the debt restructuring deal will result in increased investment opportunities that will subsequently result in economic growth, job creation, and lower the cost of living, which has remained above the income of most households. Prudence Jota, reporting for Camnet TV News.
The official bilateral creditor countries have agreed to provide the much needed debt relief to Zambia as follows. A. Significant debt relief through a significant maturity extension of our existing debt by more than 12 years, with final maturity in the year 2043. So the debt has been stretched up to 2043, a significant maturity extension of our existing claims by more than 12 years, with the final maturity in the year 2043. B, interest rates will be cut from what they are today to a very concessional rate during the next 14 years and will not exceed 2.5% thereafter under the baseline scenario. C, principal repayments starting in 2026, 3 years from now, but only for 0.5% of the debt stock per annum for the period 2026 to 2035. In other words, what will be paid will only be a small fraction of what ought to have been paid. Madam Speaker, this agreement also includes an adjustment mechanism that recognizes the uncertainties that exist regarding Zambia's future debt carrying capacity. The adjustment mechanism provides for an
Well, there you have it. That was Finance Minister there, Dr. Stumbeko Msogotwane, explaining the data restructuring process. And before that, we did play a story pertaining to a date where the civil society organizations were calling for hard work among Zambians, as opposed to laziness in the wake of the debt restructuring process. Now, you too, our dear viewers, you can give us your views on the breakfast show this morning in case you want to share your highlights about the data restructuring process which Zambia secured last week. And we want to just hear from you. What is your perspective? We don't want to impose the views on you. You can also share with us as a country. Now that we have this debt restructuring, what does it mean? What do we need to focus on? These are the issues we need to be discussing as a country, because ultimately this debt does not only affect the government or those who are in office, it affects each and every one of us. And how we resolve this debt issue in the long run depends on how we put our heads together collectively as a country, because remember, this country belongs to every one of us, and we all have a duty to make sure that we contribute towards its flourishing. And if we do not contribute, no one is going to do that for us. Zambia will only be developed by Zambians. So hence, as Zambians, what are the ideas are we putting on the table? What do we want this government to do? What are our recommendations? So these are things that we are discussing this morning pertaining to the data restructuring. And later on the program, we're going to have someone from the UPND Alliance to just help us discuss their perspective on this subject. But you too, our dear viewers, you are free to get in touch with us or leave us a message on our social media platforms. Remember that we are streaming live on our social media platforms, including Facebook as well as YouTube. And you can also leave us that message on those platforms and tell us where you are watching us from.
So that those are some of the stories talking about debt restructuring, and I have a message here from Wiseman Bwalia, who says that's not an achievement to celebrate about, and that is he's making that comment via our Facebook page, which is Camnet TV. So if you are also want to comment as regards what you're looking at, you can try that particular platform. Also go to Facebook, then go to Camnet TV, and then you will find this particular program live on that particular page, and you can go to the comment section and leave your comments there. We'll be more than happy to have a look at what you think. Alicia B. Malamora says, keep up the good work. Thank you very much. So you can go to that particular page also and leave us your comments, and so that we just see what you think about what you're looking at this morning. And this, in this case, is debt restructuring. Now, some residents of Lusaka have called on government to continue sensitizing to conduct sensitization campaigns on the benefits of Zambia's $6.3 billion United States dollars debt being restructured. Now, some of the residents in Kanyama tell Camnet News that they have no information on the country's debt being restructured. Meanwhile, an economist, Emmanuel Zulu, says government should provide adequate information on the terms and conditions attached to the debt. Mr. Zulu says doing so will steer a target in terms of country generating the much needed revenue. Let's have a look at this report.
On 23rd June 2023, Zambia struck a deal to restructure $6.3 billion in debt owed to governments abroad, including China, in a breakthrough for indebted nations around the world that have faced lengthy negotiations with their creditors. This move has sparked celebrations in the country as it has been received with open arms by many. While this is the case, some Lusaka residents are still in the dark on the debt restructuring process. They explained to this journalist that they don't know a thing about the debt and are only concerned with the running of their businesses.
Tingafuna tiponzisa kuti taziva zona ndaiviva kuti tinamverako chabe so sivina titandisi titi mavene boma kuti ngatitandizire mu mabusiness yathu aya monga marepu so chabe matomato upeza niyodula yode so chabe so nge tingachiteko benefit kaidi ni ja kuti nezomvera kuchawe nkongole zinasala ziko so izo nkongole mamene makambia zinasira zinasira so manje kaipo pasogolo manje pochitika manje after zasira pochitika
kubebenzi balinganame bebenzi bapo mwandi vili vonse so tufuna che akabwera katupunseko chapa katuze pankani yankongole kubeche tuziva isi tingali patuzive ngani mwene yendera kaituona vintu vavuta patudanda uloke tulira yi palipose tilira so manje situziva chilengesa ni chani mwaona ka tudanda ula.
Meanwhile, economist Emmanuel Zulu says that the debt restructuring deal has been sealed and means the country's fiscal space can now improve. Mr. Zulu says there is need for government to provide necessary information on the terms and conditions attached to the deal.
But well, going forward, we also expect that the economy will grow more than at the rate at which it is growing. That is around 4%, probably to get to 7%. Of course, growth comes with its own consequences. We may jump into a lower middle income country, and also that may actually have consequences on the interest that we might have to pay. So I think one cardinal point that we also need to understand is that this debt relief is not debt forgiveness. So we might actually need to be very wise in the way the resources that will be made available will be actually invested, because we need to repay this debt after some period. So we expect the best out of it, and probably if there could be more details being made available to the public by the Minister of Finance, it will really help the public to actually understand more about this debt restructuring deal that Zambia has gone into. So ultimately it provides, for fiscal space that can actually see government do more projects, grow the economy.
The debt earmarked for restructuring includes $1.3 billion in arrears and $6.8 billion for private sector creditors. It, however, remains important that the majority of the citizens understand the benefits of the debt agreement with official creditors. Nelson Zulu for Camnet News, Lusaka.
Thank you very much, Nelson, for that particular report talking about sensitizing residents or citizens as regards what is tied around this restructuring of our debts. Now, interesting views are coming through on our Facebook page. People are weighing in as regards this particular topic. Now, Lucky Nchimunya says it is good for us, but we need to utilize the time we have been given to invest in revenue generating sectors so that when it's time to pay, we will have some money to pay back. Otherwise, it's a welcome move. We commend government for that. Now, Maurice Jempa replies to Wiseman Bwalia, who had said there's nothing to celebrate about. So he says, Wiseman Bwalia, it is a step in the right direction to all Zambians, except PF, who had failed to strike a balance. At some point, Antonio Mwanza said it in a foolhardy manner, and that no one can make that. I have the clip in brackets. He says he has a video of Antonio saying this. One thing I dislike PF for is that they don't appreciate and only bend to support their terrible wrongdoings. Which one is better between embracing brutal cadres and managing to strike such a balance? Now, PF failed completely, and I repeat, it is something to celebrate about for well-meaning Zambians, except PF. Let us call a spade a spade. Thank you very much. So you can also go to our Facebook page and leave your comments there as regards this very interesting topic. What do you make of the messages that have come through?
Yeah, those are the opinions we are calling for. Those are the issues we want Zambians to talk about, because it shows that now they have an interest in the subject.
They are engaging.
Yeah, they are engaging because it is important that everyone else get involved and get interested in matters that affect the country. The debt situation, like I told you, does not only affect the government. Let's say, for example, it was the PF administration that was in office when we were contracting this debt.
Sure.
But have you seen that who is now working towards restructuring this debt? It is this government. And who are the people who are constant? It is the Zambian people. When the PF were in office, the Zambian people were there. When the UPND is in office, Zambians are there. So Zambians have to ultimately get involved and speak with their minds regarding matters that are national in nature.
So these governments don't come with their own citizens. Citizens will always be there. Whoever comes into office contracts debts and moves on. Citizens will always be there. I like Nchimunya's thought. He says, it's a good thing, but we need to invest in the revenue generating sectors so that when the time comes, we have the money to pay back.
Exactly.
Sure.
Exactly. You cannot agree with him more, because it's ultimately, even at personal level, it's about you. When you get a loan, you invest in something that you'll be able to make profit out of that and also be able to pay back the loan. Unlike a situation whereby you get the loan, you squander it. Now, when time to pay back comes, again, you go and get another loan from someone, you pay this loan, again, you know those problems, right?
Sure.
So that sometimes it's about generating the real capacity for you to pay back. And there's no substitute for that, because it's about investing in the productive sectors that when we invest, we know that we'll be generating enough revenue, such that, for example, if we develop a sinking fund, so these are the issues we are going to be asking this ministry, the Ministry of Finance, if they are going to be developing a sinking fund to make sure that little by little they are reserving money towards debt repayment.
Sure.
Because we were assured under the PF, though that didn't come into fruition. There was nothing in the coffers for the sinking fund, but they assured us, they say we have developed a sinking fund that's towards a debt repayment. But when the time came, we defaulted on our Eurobond. That gets to tell you that we were not strict to what we were thinking about as a country and adhering to the principles set by ourselves back then. So now we have another opportunity under the UPND. We have this debt restructured. But what do we do under this period they have been given relief to restructure? You know, part of it, the debt has been restructured by, it's a government debt, COSI, which is the government of China and other Western countries. Now, That's amount to the one that was about 6 billion. Now, there's also a debt that we owe the private sector, like private entities, individuals. So now, because we have managed to secure government-to-government debt relief, we are able to also now secure on that private arrangement. We can still now negotiate with those other creditors or on the private basis and be able to get a deal. That's what that means. So now we continue to get your views, and we are happy that the conversation is going on our social media platform, that is Facebook. And you, our viewers, we value your contribution. Your views matter, because at the end of the day, every opinion counts. And let's also look at another story now pertaining to Government Chief Whip Stafford Mulusa as charged that infrastructure development that was carried out under the Patriotic Front's tenure in office was only a conduit of corruption. Mr. Mulusa says that development perceived to have taken place under the PF was meant to develop individuals and not the country. Speaking during a press conference at Parliament in Lusaka Tuesday, Mr. Mulusa says the consequences of looting in the previous administration can be seen through the ongoing prosecution. So let's get that story. We'll be back on the other side.
Opposition members of Parliament, those who belong to the governing United Party for National Development (UPND) and sympathizers to the ruling party, Tuesday held a press conference to counter the allegations made by lawmakers on the opposing side. Chief Government Whip Stafford Mulusa has charged that infrastructure development that was carried out under the Patriotic Front's tenure in office was only a conduit for corruption. He alleges that the Patriotic Front overborrowed and poorly invested the resources, yet they have the energy to downplay the achievements being made by President Hakainde Hichilema's administration to clean up their mess.
They spent money for their own good, and that is why today most of them are singing hymns during weekends, because they want forgiveness from God. Yes, they have to seek forgiveness from God. What they did to this country is a lot of damage. Siavonga Road is in bad state. Lusaka-Ruangwa Road is in bad state, just here, between Lusaka and Eastern Province. What link is that? Nothing. Lundazi Chama, Matumbo Road, UPND is doing that road. Chinsari Nakonde Mbara Road, already in bad state. They spent money there, but it's in bad state. It means that this government has to do that road. Go to Rapura Province. Who can talk of Pedco Road today?
Meanwhile, the opposition Patriotic Front has continued to cry foul that it is being persecuted as law enforcement wings continue to arrest those suspected to have committed crimes, with the latest one being Dali Solungu, the son to former President Edgar Lungu. But UPND Katombora constituency member of Parliament Clement Andeleki says enforcing the rule of law does not equate to political persecution.
Section 90 of the Criminal Procedure Code allows a citizen to bypass the police and take up a criminal action against anybody who has transgressed against the individual rights or the liberties of that person. So it is very, very unfair for the minority party, the Patriotic Front today, to come here and say there are no benefits on this, the civic space has been reduced, people are being abducted. No one is being abducted. Izan Patel and all others, they have been arrested and they are answering to the law. There is a due process of the law. The former press aide for the president, whatever he was, that young doctor, is answering to the law. Terrorism is non-bearable. It's just like murder. You cannot give somebody bail or bond when the Zambian people have said this offense is non-bearable.
Among other speakers is Robert Chabinga, the PF Mafinga constituency lawmaker who defended the involvement of the president in the implementation of the Constituency Development Fund, CDF.
25.7 million and 28.3 million. Really, you don't want the president to be involved? 156 vehicles. These are being procured. Apart from that, those are CDF monitoring vehicles. We will be also procuring 156 ambulances. We will be also procuring 156 police vehicles. Really, you don't want the president to be involved? I found it very strange.
Patrick Soko, Camnet News.
Well, there you have it. That is the story there coming from members of parliament from the government side, as well as one interesting aspect. Robert Chavenga is a PF member of parliament, and he has been sympathizing with the government. He says he's happy with the way the PF, the UPND administration is running things, especially under President Hakainde Hichilema, and is willing to work with the government of the day. So come 2026, those are members of parliament you're likely to see on the UPND ticket. And you can see there he was, he enjoys the company of the chief government with their Stafford Musa, and he was talking about, in fact, he did criticize the PF pertaining to various issues, because especially bordering on the Constituency Development Fund, CDF. He did criticize his own political party. I think he's among those who have been lost by the PF. Now, the only thing I don't know is that anyway, he hasn't declared to resign from the party. But what happens if the party expels him from being the member of parliament?
Well, that's a by-election. So if you are expelled, but you see, I feel that political parties must give their members the freedom to express themselves. So that should not warrant you being expelled from the party, because you think a little bit differently about what is transpiring around the country. So they must have their own free mind. I know that you must buy into the party's beliefs, but is it in Chimunya says, let's call a spade a spade? Maybe that's a route that politicians ought to take.
Yeah, interesting. Anyway, we just hope that it does not end up into expulsions, and that so that we may have by-elections, you know. I remember during the PF we were on a long spree of by-elections throughout up to the general election. We were conducting by-elections, and for now we have rested up after that election for Bowman Sambo and Joe Malanji. At least we have rested. You know, we spend a lot of money on these by-elections, and they are costly to the country, especially as the country is healing in the wake of this data burden that we have, Kozi.
Yeah, and this is not the first time that we see MPs supporting other political parties, because even the UPND, when they were in the opposition, we did see members of parliament from the opposition.
Yeah, but others when were disciplined, do you remember?
Yes.
They cracked a whip.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, interesting views there. You too can give us your perspectives, our dear viewers, on the stories that we are looking at this morning. And because what we have
we continue to zoom in the stories that were making the headlines in our news, and the Lusaka Chief Resident Magistrate Davis Chimbwiri has ordered the arrest of Lumezi Member of Parliament Munia Zulu following his failure to appear before court twice. Now, Magistrate Chimbwiri says a bench warrant against Mr. Zulu Tuesday morning, after being informed that the accused and his sureties were not before court. Now, this is in a case in which Mr. Zulu is charged with 3 counts of libel against Minister of Finance and National Planning, Tumbekom Sokotwani, and his infrastructure, housing and urban development counterpart, Charles Mirupi. Mr. Zulu accused the 2 ministers of receiving corrupt payments of 250,000 United States dollars each from an unknown company. Let's have a look at this report.
Independent Lumezi Area Member of Parliament Munia Zulu faces arrest following the subordinate court decision to issue a bench warrant against him. Lusaka Chief Resident Magistrate Davis Chiwili ordered the arrest of Mr. Zulu Tuesday morning following his failure to appear before court twice. Mr. Zulu was set to appear before Magistrate Chiwili this morning in relation to a case he's accused with 3 counts of libel against Minister of Finance and National Planning, Dr. Stompeko Msokotwane, and his Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development, Charles Milupi. When the matter was caught, neither his lawyers nor sureties were before court, a situation that left the magistrate to issue a bench warrant against him, taking into account that it was the second time this was happening. The accused missing court session without any reason. However, the lawmaker appeared few hours after the matter was adjourned in the company of his lawyers, with a view to explain to the court what had happened. Magistrate Chiwili, however, maintained his position that he had already issued a bench warrant against the accused. Meanwhile, speaking to the media shortly after his appearance, this was Mr. Zulu's explanation.
I couldn't appear without my lawyers, and my lawyers were in court 6. And then we've made all efforts possible to see the magistrate. Unfortunately, our request or plea has been rejected. How can we run away from courts? I mean, we are responsible citizens and we are people of non-abode. So I'm shocked that a bench warrant has been issued against myself when my lawyers were in court 6. I was there waiting that I go with my lawyers. So now that the court has refused to see us, I do not know what to do next. I'll consult my lawyers, but we're here.
According to a police statement, Mr. Zulu had alleged that Dr. Stompeko Msokotwane and Charles Milupi, both ministers in the Zambian government, had received a corrupt payment of $250,000 United States dollars each from an unknown company. In addition, Mr. Zulu also made a defamatory statement against engineer Muchant Katawala, alleging that he had sent $150,000 United States dollars to Mr. Charles Milupi before his appointment as the board chairperson for the Road Development Agency. The matter has been adjourned to the 7th of July 2023. Miriam Kaimba, reporting for Camnet TV News. After spending close to 30 days in police custody, former presidential political advisor Chris Zumani finally made his first court appearance before the Lusaka Magistrate Court Tuesday afternoon. Zumani, 44, who served under the Patriotic Front administration, is standing trial alongside Given Piri, Marlon Banda, both businessmen, and Port Fangawa, a nurse, with charges in relation to possession of terrorism articles contrary to Section 25 of the Anti-Terrorism and Non-Proliferation Act 2018, as read with Act 16 of 2013. The 4 appeared before Magistrate Mvula, who has immediately committed them to the Lusaka High Court following the issuance of the Certificate of Committal by the Director of Public Prosecution. Allegations in the first count is that the 4 between the 2nd and 23rd of February 2023 were in possession of 1 bottle of 250 ml of paraffin, among other articles, for purpose connected with the commission, preparation or instigation of an act of terrorism. In the second count, they are facing a charge of procurers of terrorism articles. They are also alleged to have been found with the said bottles of paraffin, 1 bottle of 350 ml deep, 601 bottle of 250 ml, isopropyl articles used for the communication of a terrorist act, while in the last count, Chris Zimba on the 1st of February 2020 and the 22nd of February 2020 allegedly aided Given Piri and Melon Banda, his co-accused, to conduct terrorist acts in Petauke District, Western Province. The 4 are accused of being in connection with the chemical gassing incident that characterized the country in early 2020. They are expected to soon appear before the Lusaka High Court for their trial. They remain in custody as the offense they are charged with is non-bailable. Miriam Kaimba, reporting for Camnet TV News.
Welcome back. You are still watching the Camnet Breakfast Show with me, Patrick Soko, and Marco Kwakozi. And we were zooming in some of the stories that were making the headlines in the Camnet main news. Interesting stories there we were looking at pertaining to the quotes brought by Miriam Kaimba. A story coming from involving the former presidential aide who was President Edgar Lungu's political advisor, Mr. Chris Zimba. He has been charged with matters related to terrorism, and these matters are non-bearable according to the laws of Zambia. Now, Mr. Zimba and his co-accused were appearing before the court. I hope you did manage to hear that story. And we also looked at another story there involving Mezi Member of Parliament, Munia Zulu, where he has been issued with a bench warrant. Well, we never get hold of the PF members of Parliament that are continuing to frequent court cases. That reminds me of why, given when the PF acting president was suggesting that they need to have an office at the magistrate court, probably that is appropriate because they are always there every day, each and every other day. At least one member from the PF is appearing. Interesting issues there, cozy.
So this is what some school of thought are saying. This is political persecution because so many PF members are being arrested or taken to court or something like that. But you did a story where Chief Government Whip says this is as a result of the looting, as he put it, in the previous regime. So there are various different thoughts as regards these matters. But moving on, we have now been joined by Mr. Mlenga from NAREP, and he is here to discuss issues relating to debt restructuring. Mr. Mlenga, thank you very much for making it to Camnet Breakfast. Welcome to this interview.
Thank you so very much, and good morning all viewers out there.
Now, just last week, is it last week? Early this week, news broke that the government managed to broker a deal with our debtors as regards restructuring of the 6.3 billion United States dollars. What is your quick impression to this development?
Okay, thank you so very much. We also need to understand where we're coming from as a nation. We know that this country was actually suffocated with debt. We had a very big debt from our lenders, such that we're not able to do anything as a country economically because of the debt. And we should also know that we are the first country, I think, before the 2021 elections, to have failed to pay even the interest. We're in default, meaning that our economy actually was in shambles, I would call it, that we cannot do much as a nation. Under the PF regime, we saw how they really fought to making sure that they have the debt restructured. As a result of that, they went ahead to contract a company called Lazard to help them restructure the loan. So with that, I think prior to the 2021 elections, they were also coming out in open to say they were able now, probably trying to get the debt restructured, and it was all in vain. For the past, I think they tried for 4 or 5 years, they failed to have the debt restructured. Now we are under the UPND regime. Within 2 years, we've seen that they've managed to have this debt restructured. And what does that mean to the nation? It means now, as a country, some of our loans will be given a longer period in which we need to pay. Meaning that if we have a longer period, obviously the installments that you need to pay will be smaller. Let's break it down to our level, where you're owing 10,000 kwacha, and you're supposed to pay 3,000 kwacha plus interest, maybe 3,500. But your salary is probably 5,000, leaving you with 1,500. Now these your lenders tell you to say, okay, because the 6 month, maybe 3 months loan will give you 7 months to pay. You're going to be paying 1,600 kwacha. I'm just giving an example. Meaning that from your 5,000, you will have almost 3,700 that will make you pay probably your rentals and buy food and take your children to school. That is what is happening to this country. These lenders now are saying, with what you are able to generate as an economy, as a country, with this probably stretched period, let's say 20 years, the installment will be smaller. With what you generate, you would be able to pay back, and be able to do what it's supposed to do as a nation. And on top of that, other lenders will consider reducing their interest rates. Others will even say, probably the principal that you are paying, you've paid probably in this manner. Let's see how you can pay to make you do other things that you need to do as a nation. And that is just good. And it also gives you leverage, that you have got enough resources that you are able to generate to go to others to say, where I was not able to buy milli-meal, probably I would get another 500 kwacha. From what I'll be able to generate, I'll pay. You go to cheaper loans now, probably where the interest rate would be lower, and make you have sufficient resources for yourselves. And that is a good thing that has happened. That's why you saw most Zambians, most of us went out to welcome the president, to signify that now we've seen a sign of relief. We will rejuvenate our economy to see a lot of things come to fruition as a nation.
You mentioned Lazard there. Do you think their services were not necessary?
Which ones?
You mentioned Lazard when the PF brought them. Do you think their services were not necessary?
Remember, the premise from which they came is that the PF government that time failed within themselves to get lenders agree with them on the round table discussion. So they had to contract, actually at a very exorbitant, I would say, fare, at fees, $3 million. That time we were in opposition, we were saying, why can't we sit amongst ourselves, find a solution to which we can engage our lenders and be able to pay. However, knowing that this is government, they had started the work was in progress, and they had been contracted. Because of contractual obligations, we needed to take them on board. But the good thing is that with the credibility that we have now, we've been given what we needed, which is a good thing for the country.
Interesting. I was asking that, I thought you thought they were irrelevant in the Baruchan, because we did hear the finance minister that they continued with the contract.
I'm quite cognizant of that fact, actually.
They have played a major role in securing
I'm quite cognizant of
Now, moving on, we have comments, for example, on our social media platforms who are suggesting that there's nothing to smile about. Otherwise, this is just transferring the burden to the future generations. What would be your immediate reaction?
Like I earlier alluded to, you were paying from your salary of 5,000, you are paying 3,500. You are paying rentals 1,500. What are you going to remain with to buy food at home, to pay for your school fees, for the kids and everything, and do whatever that's supposed to do? Literally, you not do anything. Now you go to the lenders to say, give me a stretch period that I'll be paying 1,500. So that my disposable income, from which I'm able to do what I'm supposed to do at household level, I'll be able to manage to feed my children. I'll be able to take my children to probably give them food and whatever they need. So it is with our economy. We are saying, let's give ourselves breathing space. We're not going to say, forgive us. We are indebted. But we're engaging them to say, how then do we help each other? And that's the best way that we can always do. And that is what we can do. What else do they want? They borrowed. Actually, most of the people that are making noise, the previous government, they are the ones that put us in this problem, in this mess that we find ourselves into. Now we are saying there's a solution to this problem, and this is how we can come out from this problem.
Interesting. Well, dear viewers, in conversation we have the National Restoration Party Deputy Secretary General, Mr. Martin Mulinga. In case you want to join us or ask your questions, you can do so on the program, and we keep interacting. Now, we are discussing debt restructuring and other current affairs. You too, or dear viewers, your opinions matter. In case you want to do so, you can reach us via the number that comes on your screen. Now, going on with the program. Now, Mr. Mulenga, there is also another interesting aspect now that we have this a bit of relief as a country, do we have to relax?
No, actually it gives you an opportunity. Like I brought it down to a household level. You've been given an opportunity that now you pay probably smaller amounts. You need to even produce more as a nation, such that those smaller amounts that we're paying will not be felt and in the manner that you would have felt if you're not producing more. So this gives an opportunity for this country. We'll plow money into social sectors, health, education. With this free education, there's more need for money to be plowed into free education. There's more money that is needed to put into infrastructure.
How does investing in the social sector help us to pay back the debt?
No. This is a country. You can never. It's like your children. You're saying you want to build a house, then I will not be able to give them food at home. It's very irresponsible, I think, for us as parents.
But the first thing
so
you
what I'm
mentioned
trying to
is
say,
the social sectors. We understand that we cannot ignore the social sectors in this context. But when we are talking about paying back, having sufficient capacity, do we have to prioritize the social sectors?
Let me give you an example. I was talking about having to plow money into where we need it as a nation. For instance, we do a road that goes to Kalumbila. You and I will benefit from that road because now the mines will use that road for getting copper. We also use that road to travel because you are doing business probably in Solwezi and all that. When you and I have got resources, we are going to pay taxes. When the mines are able to produce more because of now that we have got better roads, there we are saying we'll produce more because this country is in their need of resources.
How are people going to have resources, Mr. Manga, when the cost of living is high and the salaries are stagnant? How do you expect people to have disposable income? What do you mean?
I'll tell our viewers out there, this country, like we earlier mentioned, we were a country that was almost drowning in terms of debt. Now, the water levels, I would say, you can stretch your hand, you can do that, meaning that's giving you an opportunity to say, how then are we going to help ourselves? Take, for instance, we've got more teachers that have been employed. More people, our youths are getting into the army, getting to the NS, all those are things that will help our economy to grow. Let me give you an example. If these are our colleagues that are getting jobs now, need accommodation. You and I, for instance, we built houses in Kalingalinga. Just you as Mr. Soko, if you have 3 that are getting houses from you.
I built a house and I don't even qualify for a mortgage.
Mr. Soko, let's not be simplistic about these things.
I want us to be practical.
Mr. Soko, my giving an example of you is figurative.
Now it's
figurative.
Sometimes
it's figurative.
I understand.
As Zambians who, by virtue of having this pool of people that are now working, that we can build houses.
I understand, but there's a school of thought that when we are measuring the success of the country, you focus on the most vulnerable. Probably you and I may be average citizens, but when we look at the vulnerable, how are they able to benefit? So we shouldn't be able to look at those who are moderate and able to manage.
The trickle-down effects. Yes. The trickle-down effects.
Yes, Mr. Mulenga.
Will be immense. And this is how an economy grows. If we've got people that are doing business, for instance, you and myself at the grassroots, even if we are selling cabbage, but because of many people that have got, let's say, employment, we'll be able to sell cabbage. Even at the household level, you have got like a garden behind your house, you water with a bucket every morning, and you've got 100 heads of or 50 heads of cabbage at 10 kwacha one. On average, you would be saying, how much will that be? 500 kwacha a day. Get the point? We are trying to say, let's work together as Zambians for us to see this economy blossom. And this government is trying to put an environment from which you and I are able to operate. And the starting point, they are saying, let's create employment. Let's have free education. Let's have a lot of people that are engaged in the private sector. And these are opportunities that we need to seize.
You mentioned...
get them. Get ourselves into doing something.
You mentioned an interesting aspect of job creation. In which angles are we looking at the job creation agenda?
Number one, there's a formal sector. There's also the private sector. You get the point? Others would get formal jobs like we are talking about, ZNS, DAF, Zambia Army, the prisons, the teachers, who we are employing, I would say, as a nation in their thousands. Those of us that are in the private sector, we can go into making chairs, making beds, whatever that we can do to provide for these our colleagues that will need what we are doing. By doing all that, we are helping ourselves as an economy to grow. We get to get the benefits from what is obtaining. I can give you an example with our teachers that we have now in their numbers. People in the rural areas, those that built houses a long time ago, they are saying now we've got 30 teachers at this primary school. The nearest compound probably is Kamanga, where we are coming from. Rentals here, 1,000. The other guy says, no, for me, what I'll be doing is these teachers, younger business. Because now from this place to that place, they'll need probably transport. All those are opportunities from which we can create resources for ourselves.
Don't you think you are being too simplistic?
Not at all.
The manner you are talking about, for example, the job creation agenda. Because others would argue that those are consumptive jobs. And for instance, when let's say we are looking on the regional context, don't you think, for example, issues pertaining to industrialization are vital if Zambia is to really be able to generate sufficient resources and be able to be paying back its debt? But you're not mentioning that.
Maybe before you come in, I was going to take Soko's thoughts. Don't you think this is a time now that we should sort out our issues in the mining sector so that the mining industry is up and about to help us raise resources? Because we should be starting, according to me, Finance Minister, paying back in 2026.
You're on point. I was just trying to reason with my colleague Sogo before you came in, actually. You know, he wanted to bring us down to the most vulnerable. So in that context, we took it down to explain to our people that are down there in our compounds, because we wanted to relate what is obtaining with the trickle-down effects that we'll have if our economy does blossom. So there are many benefits that we're going to get. But having mentioned what you just said about industrialization and also looking at how much money that we can generate to help our economy grow, that is quite key. What is it that this government is doing to make sure that we have people getting to invest in this country? Number one, we all know that we've had trouble in the copper belt because of non-availability of investors. But now, this time we're here, we know that there are people that are now interested to invest in Mopani, to invest in KCM, which is a good thing. All this is coming as a result of now credibility that we've attained as a nation. Number one, we've seen that there's prudence in the usage of resources. No wonder the lenders out there are saying we can give them relief because there's goodwill from this government. They have confidence in this government. So moving forward, we would see a lot of investment coming into this country. The mines are coming up. We've got prospects of gold in a lot of places in this country. And the CCMIH is not sitting idle to what is obtaining. They are looking of ways and means to push resources into those areas such that we can generate more money locally as a nation. And given the period that we've been given a period from which you're going to say, okay, moratorium, this period, mobilize yourself, you'll not be paying anything. And that gives an opportunity for ourselves to say, how then do we engage ourselves into sectors that will generate more resources? Yesterday I heard one of the members of parliament who was putting things where they are supposed to be, mangoes in oranges, in eggs. Quite unfortunate. This country now, we feel is in the right trajectory in terms of economic activities. We are coming from a background where things were I would say, ruined. We had corruption, we had lack of seriousness, where we saw a president of the country being asked about the financial, intelligent, the report that there was so much corruption at the time that our lady, Madam Chirwa, was with the FIC. The president rubbished, I would say trashed that report by calling it infwit. Now, if the big person on top can belittle a report that is coming from an organ that is supposed to pay attention to, how then would those people at grassroots level respond to? That's why we saw rampant corruption under the PF regime. And a rider on that, because of the rampant corruption that we saw under the PF, we saw how people who had no bicycle were in 15 houses. Most of them are coming from Chawama. We know them. Muntu afuma ku Chawama, esa kwata ma flats 55, esa kwata ma flats 16, esa kwata ma flats 96. And today, if they are called to police to say, you, basoko to administration of Makamanga imwe. So, mwakwata ma flats 17, how? Persecution.
So, Mr.
No. Let's be serious.
From Chawama to be.
I totally agree with you. Even if you are coming from Kabulonga, even if you are coming from Handsworth or whatever the place, but my brother, you have not owned a bicycle in 4 years.
I have it for the record. It's because Mr. Mlenga is going
Mr.
to say,
Mr. Soko, 3 years. Talk with upon a bicycle. Then you have 15 trucks. Any responsible government that comes into office would say, tell us how, exonerate yourself. And this is what was happening under the PF. We know them. We can't mention names here, but we know them. They had literally nothing. In 4 years of being in government, building flats everywhere, littered in Lusaka. And this government says, we cannot allow that.
But there has been another question, Mr. Mlenga. Now that you mentioned this issue, they say that there are people or foreigners who are coming into this country with a lot of wealth. They are not being questioned, but if a Zambian like Mr. Mlenga owns something or gets wealth, you start chasing after them because you are enemies.
Not at all. Not at all. Even if it were a foreigner who comes into this country and is renting,
foreigners already.
No. If you
are you aware that most of the properties that we have in this country are being owned by foreigners? They're especially big facilities, or especially the malls that are mushrooming, Mr. Mule.
Mr. Soko,
tell us.
Let's not be simplistic with corruption. Let's be real. Our Zambian people are hurting out there. We know our politicians, where people literally had not owned not even a spatial. Then 3 years of being in government, they own 15 trucks. And we want to simplify that, Mr. Soko, to our Zambian people. That's not correct. That's not correct. Let's be serious. There was so much corruption under the PF regime that all of us...
So, Mr. Mulenga, did you do a prior and after audit of, for example, politicians? Did you audit them to say, this is what you have and this is what you have now? How would you predict that this person did not have these things?
The simple thing that we can do is, if you are to be serious with what we are discussing here, let's go to one of the former ministers' bank accounts. Just say, let's backtrack. 4 years, check the balance. Most of them, you find their balances was 350 kwacha, 270 kwacha. Then now, after 4 years, 27 million. Really, let's be serious. Our Zambian people are hating. They are suffering.
Okay.
Then now you ask them to say, there's 27 million in your account and 7 houses. How much were you saving? How much was your salary? Salary was it? As a minister, probably was below 40,000. Your allowances put together 63,000. Now, from this 63, you are paying rentals. You are taking your children to school.
They are given housing.
I know. I know a lot of about what they get. I know.
And they are given government houses.
I know. I'm speaking from an informed position.
Now, yes. Now you're talking about rentals now, Kaidi. I want you to calculate.
I'm speaking from an informed position. So I'm trying to put all these things together, and I'm saying.
And others were at their own houses before getting into office.
Yes.
Now you can go ahead as you explain.
Yes, we know those are the houses. 1 house, 2 houses. Others were from Katondo. We know them. Others were die-hard. We know them. Some of them, and for our personal friends, our family members, so we know each other more than probably you journalists. So we know where they're coming from. But really, what we are saying is that from literally having these small things, then someone tells you to say, I've got 17 flats. One flat is 15 million. Then you say 10 trucks, 17 trucks. Really, as a nation, we need to be serious. Explain to us where you are gotten those things. And these that are being called to police, the Zambian people know there's no persecution. Yasuke ni mwagwete shani. Basoko. It's very simple. If your salary is 7,000 here, and I see you flashing money out there, you're throwing money to people. But Soko 7,000, even your fellow employees would be saying, but Soko, is he doing any business that he can be flashing money out there? Or Wasanga 6 pin, or Wasanga 5 pin. Actually, even management need to fire you to say, there's no way, Soko, probably you have more money out there, you don't deserve this job. And they were telling us they were in business. That business, they are out of office, they're not doing that business. What is it that...
Let's pick this call, Mr.
Sure.
Mlenga, before you proceed further.
Hello?
Hello, you are through to the Camnet Breakfast Show. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Musoko. How are you?
Fine, thank you. And how are you?
Yeah, I'm actually watching this program. Except that that gentleman from who is the Deputy Secretary General for NARECO, is not explaining things according to how you're asking him. He has hate for the people who have worked under PS. You cannot be coming out like the world is coming out. What is important now, as he is seated there, is if he is a real Zambian, let him explain how the sufferings of the majority of the Zambians are going to be revamped or improved. That debt restructuring, I wanted him to explain properly on what is it that people are going to pursue. Because if a person can fail to explain what you have asked him several questions. He's trying to divert from what you're asking. He's just concentrating on his 15 plus. You have asked him a question of saying, what of those foreigners who are coming into Zambia, building a lot of houses like Lamasa, why are they not being followed? If you are a Zambian, him is saying, it doesn't mean that if you are not a hardworking person, then you can refer to the other people not to be hardworking. There are a lot of Zambians who have invested in a lot of assets. So let's be fair. Even when we are seeking for jobs, to say this person is seeking for a job, let him be very frank in the way he's coming out. And coming to an issue of saying how is the economy going to be grown or to improve, he's talking about the people being employed, then renting a house in Karingaringa. What of those people haven't built houses? What are they going to benefit? You are giving examples like a person who has just waked up. He was sleeping, now he has waked up and he wants to give things as if he is not. That's the reality. People are suffering. And when you look at the Zambians who voted for the change, now they are suffering. Because they can't have those 3 meals in a day. Even him, I wonder if he has even eaten. So let's be factual. I was watching short term where I was explaining why that restructuring, debt restructuring is not going to help the government now, because the people are going to come into government in the future are the one who's going to have that budget. So those things are supposed to be discussed in a way that a poor Zambian who is in missions will understand it according to how the economy is now. Okay, that debt restructuring has been done by the government. What has improved in terms of commodities in the shops? The government of minimum have reduced. So our Secretary General, that's why our Secretary General, what party issue with that? The party of Wakaya. Because I'm watching him on the show. So he is on TV. Otherwise, If it wasn't that I wanted to have other programs I could have switched off because the person is very polite in terms of the way he talked about it.
Thank you very much for coming. Our anonymous caller.
Restructuring.
Our anonymous caller there.
Before you respond to that question, maybe also try and help us understand what would have happened if, because we devoted, what would have happened if this, you said the water was almost in the neck, what would have happened next to the country if this deal was not brokered?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Had we not managed to have our debt restructured, number one, we are failing to pay even the interest. Meaning that the principal amount that I want to go to drive into issues of economics. I'm not an economist myself, but I wanted to simplify. No wonder I was giving an example of our situations that everyone will relate with. I gave an example where we are saying 5,000 is your salary. Then you are paying in Congole 3,500. Then washana 1,500. Your 1,500 ulipile mwenganda ushitemo nefyakulia. Uinava na batatu. Nothing would have happened. Okay. What we are going to say is that this country was going to come to a standstill. Okay. Then we are saying now, because we've got leverage, we have an opportunity to say, Naralipida 1,500 in Congole, Nashana 3,500. I would buy food for my children. I will buy clothes. I want to simplify it such that those of us that is saying, to understand. That is what debt restructuring means to ourselves. So it is with the country. When we've got enough resources, we'll plow money into many things.
Now let me pick from one of these.
I wanted to respond to
where he's talking about how does that change the high cost of living?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to.
How does that change?
I wanted to respond.
Are you aware that the price of menu is at 250 kwacha in Lusaka?
I wanted to respond to my brother who didn't know my name, but I know from the way he sounds, he's a PF cadre. You know, he might not know that even those that are of Indian origin are Zambians. We need to be careful when you're speaking to people, especially in public. Next time he calls, there are certain people who look like they're Indians, others look they're what. We've got our relatives. So now I want to bring it down because he questioned whether I'm Zambian. I wanted to.
Your word.
No,
we are talking about indigenous
Zambians. What I'm saying is that I want to bring it down that we need to be careful because this constitution allows that you can be Zambian through many ways. Indigenous means even if you are Indian of origin, you are indigenous Zambian. There are indigenous who are Indian origin, who are our cousins. So we don't need to segregate anyone based on their skin, based on where they're coming. It's very sad. So what we are saying is that we are all Zambians. We are all Zambians and we want to participate in this economy.
That is not the context. Because if we are going to get that context, the interpretation, Mr. Monenga, was that those you see with the right skin, you would not touch them. And do you hear any cases mostly pertaining to these people with the light skin? All we see are people like yourself and myself with the black skin pertaining to this. That was the argument. So if we are dwelling into that now, I'm giving you a context in that. But I want you to respond on those other pertinent aspects to say how can we relate the debt restructuring to probably reducing the cost of living.
Yeah, you are very right, Mr. Soko. We've just agreed with our debtors. First thing. In everything that we need to do, we need to follow through the processes. Wayaku banki, but we are going to disburse money into your account. Then let's sit down, we look at your payslip, we look at SHAN. There are so many considerations. The first step that this country has taken, number one, in principle, we've agreed. Then now we start engaging. You comes here, we owe you how much? You sit here, we owe you how much? You sit here, how do we help us? Okay, we're going to treat each other like this. So it's a process. And the benefits are to start trickling down.
when we start to now putting things in place. And by so doing, we are going to see how things are going to unfold. And this is the right thing we have done. Let's not simplify these good things that this country has attained for the sake of political expedience. It's not good for the nation. Politics come and go. I realize he's not being happy. I'm trying to be diplomatic with my words. I don't want to say bitter. But politics is politics. But what this has done to this country must bring, I think, happiness to most of us. And we've seen some opposition political parties, actually, who have come out in open to say, this is a good thing that has happened to this country.
Let's get another argument was that, look, let's say President Hichilema is the hero for Zambia for now, in that he has managed to restructure the country's debt. But President Hichilema only has two terms. He's doing his first term. For example, if he's going to win the next election, he's going to wind up with second term. 2 terms, and this is the architect behind the debt restructuring. Now, there may be another person, either coming from the UPND or another opposition political party taking over office. Now, what does that mean in terms of the debt process? What conversations should we start talking about as a country pertaining to debt? Why I'm asking you this is that we have plans that are limited. Okay, before let's speak to this call. Hello, you are through to the Camnet Breakfast Show. Good morning. Hello, good morning. Hello, good morning.
Yes, morning, sir.
Yes.
Yes, morning. I'm hearing you. I'm calling you.
All right. Your name and where you're calling
Yes,
from?
I can hear
Your name and where you're calling us
I
from?
can hear you, sir. Yes, I just wanted to contribute on the program.
Kindly reduce the volume on your TV
the
set.
explanation is quite okay. How they are persuaded, how they are explaining it here to everyone. For the restructuring of the debt, it's a good thing which the country, which the president has done, because even in the PM, when the government, they restructured the debt of the teachers and what the civil servants, that was in PM. That thing was a relief to the teachers. So when the relief has come, it is up now to a first one individual to make an apology how it's going to work on it. So if you know this, yes, the country is not doing well, but if us, the people of Zambia, we can wake up. I'm not a politician, but I'm just giving a suggestion because the relief for a country is the way out for every individual. Even a believer, when he receives God, it's not up to him to work on his salvation. It's not a pastor to push on the salvation of somebody, but it's up to that individual who has received the Lord to work on his salvation. Also, for this country to have that restructuring of the debt, it's a relief for us living in Zambia. So when we work out, we work on every area of our life. We work for this Zambia. This million which is going up, it will be reduced. Not be lazy, because people, they want things to be on the silver plate. We don't want to work. We have more people who like sleeping than like working. That is the problem of this nation. We pray, we know God, but we fail to do. We are not the doer of the thing, but we are only a talker of things. So this is the most challenge. Yes, the government, every people has a sport, but in that area, things are okay for myself. Yeah. We can also speak about the SPM that gave them the money. That money they were giving under the PM. Some of them, they did well. Some of them, they misused the money. Even right now, the people they are receiving laughter. Some of them, they are misusing, they are just spending them to drink beer, doing whatever they are doing. They have no use. But some, they are putting their money to use. So every opportunity which comes, when we put it to use, there is benefit. But when we misuse it, there is no benefit. Even this debt restructuring has come to this nation, Zambia, if the government, the ministers, the president, they are not there to help, and even the us individual people, if we cannot add the value of it, it will be just a story without a benefit. But if we put it into use, it will be a having this point to say that those people who are interrogating, if they are giving them challenges, are giving them charges. If you interrogate somebody who is in the case of a spirit, you have to give them charge, then you are a failure. So when you interrogate somebody, charge him. We have never had any Zambia today. Every people you have never seen anybody be in jail. So we want to see somebody be in jail. So that the people they can learn from their mistakes. If you are just going to take it to a prison tomorrow, you just moving, then the people there, they will talk with you. So make sure, if you arrest somebody, charge him, take him to prison. If America, they are able to interrogate Trump, giving the charge which he did so many years ago, what about that? There are so many cases which are pending in this nation, which people were expecting to be doing long time ago, but in this time they are still spending. So they are thinking that this is you are a failure, because the case people, we can see it, but they are waiting for a government to act. So,
we didn't even get your name, sir.
Thank you very much. He's gone. Mr. Mlenga, yes. As you respond to his issues, I have quite a number of messages that I also want you to consider as you respond. Waliamelu says Mlenga needs to think outside the box. What he's suggesting is what we got, that we got KK administration into debt. The space we have now should be used to create capacity to service the loan. The social sector investment should come from the taxes that comes from productive sector. Now it calls for a whole rethink and not do business as usual. He continues to say, remember the Bible says a borrower is a slave to the lender. We rejoice and congratulate the HH administration for doing an outstanding job. Africana Tourism says, then sir, explain how Riswaniso owns shares in a mine after less than 2 years of UPND in government. Trickle-down economics have never worked to uplift the poor anywhere in the world. The rich get richer, as it is evident under the UPND administration. Wadiamelu comes back and says we need to learn from the past. A lender therefore cannot be a neutral investor. It would be good for leaders like Vamlenga to spend more time thinking and talking about who are alternative investors. Teddy Mwawa says, "Imwe guys, you may celebrate that, but what has this country done, I think, to criminals, Zambians who have taken their wealth outside Zambia? Criminal investors are stealing our mineral taxes, daylight robbery. Why has government kept quiet?" Cox Moyo says the investigation teams will only follow those who were given power to keep taxes for the nation. As you respond to the previous caller, just take also these messages in consideration.
The previous caller actually did also talk about wanting to encourage ourselves that we need to work hard as a nation, even as we see ourselves being given a period to which we are going to have our loans restructured as a country, which is a very good thing that he's talking about. He also showed his anxiety when it comes to the cases that we have in court. And the Zambian people actually, you know, when we voted our colleagues, the Patriotic Front, out, there were certain expectations. One of them was the corruption that was so much endemic under the PF. We need to have these guys arrested. And this government has responded by putting now into place the fast-track court, where issues to do with financial crimes are to be attended to in a way that could be speedy. And this is how come we have that in place. Because people had realized that these cases were taking too long. We saw how the Katele, the Faustin Kawe case took a long period of time. But eventually we saw them having been put behind bars. And this time around, this government says, let's have a court that will specifically respond to this problem. And that's how come we have got now in place a fast-track court, I would call it, financial crimes court, to making sure that they respond to these crimes that were committed by mostly politicians. And it's working well. We've seen how a lot of properties have been seized by the government. We've seen how others even went ahead to just forfeit this money. I want it to surrender it to government, probably because I know that I can't account for it. We've seen that happening. And these are things that we need to follow through. What is it that is happening? Because what people want to hear is that Mr. So-and-so has been arrested serving 4 years, so that it can be a deterrent to many that would indulge themselves into corruption. That is well understood. And no wonder this government, like I said earlier on, did put up a fast-track court to respond to such a thing. Why are people talking about that? They are talking about it because we saw the levels of corruption that were there under the PF. And someone was from the text was saying, I needed to respond how Liswaniso got some shares. I'm not privy to that information, and I'm not Liswaniso. My name is Martin Mlenga. It's very difficult for me to respond to such an
the alternative
allegation.
would be, is this government committed to fight current corruption? Because,
totally.
And aren't we going to see a situation when another government comes into power? We are seeing again the prosecution of those who have served under this administration.
Corruption. The president was very categorical about it. He said, we're going to fight, he put it in his words, previous corruption, current corruption, and future corruption. So meaning that we want to be consistent.
According to your observation, is that tally on the ground?
This time around, even us as individuals, where we smell corruption, we are at liberty to walk into any office, law enforcement agency, or any other office where they can probe corruption and report those allegations. And today, the people respond to you and be able to respond to you. And that's what we need. There is that political will from this government to fight the scourge. And that's what we need. Previously, we saw how ministers were taken, Minister of Health, 10 hours is at ACC, 14 hours is giving a ministerial statement. Going with a flag by ACC, that was just drama.
Is it different now? Are people being fired before they are investigated?
Today,
you remember that we had, for example, the case pertaining to the Foreign Affairs Minister when he was being accused. Do you remember that story? Are we seeing those people being fired to pave way for investigations, Mr. Mulenga? Or anyone to say there is a suspected element of corruption? Are we seeing any dismissals? Or it's just the same?
Not the same at all. What we are saying is that when allegations are put across, you report them to the relevant authorities.
But they were reported.
And they were reported. And investigations were done. And those investigations, people probably exonerated themselves by way of coming out in the manner that things were. If I see you and I suspect that something has happened, and you are called upon, and you explain your position, and everyone realizes that literally there was nothing, why should I punish you for something that you did not even do? But what we are saying is that the corruption that we saw under the PF,
but the argument
was so clear, even for the blind to see.
The argument is corruption. Mr. Mulenga, the argument is that, for example, now most law enforcement wings are before State House, and they are being directed to whom to look at.
How do you mean before State House?
They now report they are under State House according to a statutory instrument that was worked on. The ACC and these other law enforcement wings are before State House. So now they are saying to say they are saying don't chase after the ministers. But these are the aggregation from those who are claiming persecution. For me to be clear on that, they are saying because the SEC has been under State House, it is no wonder they are not committed to fighting the current corruption, but targeting those who served the previous administration. What would be your perspective on this?
Actually, that is out of context. What we have is political will to making sure that these organs that are fighting corruption are well funded. And that's the will that we're talking about from the president. By facilitating or creating an environment from which they are to operate operating independently.
The independence of those institutions is compromised, Mr. Mulenga. Now, what do you mean when you say because they are the State House, they are given the leeway to be independent? What do you mean?
Actually, if you put it in the manner that you're putting
what
it.
What do you mean now?
Under State House, that is not the position. Because I will tell you, and our viewers out there, for the sake of our viewers, this government respects the organs of governance. The judiciary is independent of itself, the legislature independent of itself, and the executive.
How independent is the judiciary when members of the legislature? I want to give you a practical example. The executive is everywhere. The executive is in parliament. The executive is in the judiciary. Now, where do you call the full independence of the separation of power there? Where is the separation of power there? The real separation of power, Mr. Mulenga?
It's like you're talking about a minister.
Someone, for example, I'll give you an example. Someone has a law firm. Someone is a lawyer. Is representing people before the judiciary. Again, someone is serving as a minister of justice, for example. I'm just giving an example. Where is the independent? Don't you think you can have influence over these arms?
That's how come when you're in government, a minister is the policy maker. There is no way.
Can you argue against yourself?
No, not at all. But you know your position. It's like you're saying you can wear 4 hats at the same time. It's not possible. You can only wear 1 hat at any particular time. If you're wearing a black one, meaning that a minister, when they're in office as a minister, they will not go into procurement. But it's under their ministry. You get the point? So meaning that in the way that you operate, just like members of parliament, they are ministers for policy making. That's why you see that in parliament, there are those that make policies, there are those that we interrogate by being backbenchers. So there is always that distinction.
There is no
we cannot put them in one basket.
Simplifying things, Mr. Mulenga.
I want to be categorical.
Simplifying things. For example, when you are claiming autonomy of the judiciary, that has never existed because of the current legislation we have. The Chief Justice is supposed to be the head of the judiciary, but is appointed by who? No, you have to answer the simple question.
Mr. Soko, I'll take you as my student of civics.
No, you're supposed to.
I'll take the other way around. Let's tell our viewers this one important. Let's not. I'll take you as my student of civics.
Go ahead.
The executive is independent of its own. The judiciary is independent of its own. But what happens is in government is that when you are president, even when you appoint the officers in the judiciary, they are independent of themselves. Just like ECZ officers are appointed by the president.
One of our
so what we are saying,
when you are being funded, for example, you are being controlled.
Not at all.
Who caused the shot? When you are being funded,
had it been the way that you are putting it, Edgar Lungu would not have lost the election.
No,
because he had put in the judiciary, he had put in the ECZ, but he lost the elections.
I've warned you against oversimplifying things. You are oversimplifying things. Why am I saying so? Is that, for example, are you aware that the judiciary does not enjoy financial autonomy as a teacher of civics? Are you aware?
I do.
If you are aware, you were not going to be a teacher.
So how would you mean that?
Because if you are aware, you were going to understand all this connotation when we are talking about the separation of power.
How would you mean that government, because they find the ECZ, the ECZ should be controlled by this.
But you are aware that, for example,
Parliament,
for example, that Parliament and the executive enjoy financial autonomy.
Where would you get?
Are you aware?
Where would you expect the judiciary to get the money from?
Are you aware?
I'm asking Mr.
Are
Soko,
you aware that they have to wait for approvals? Are you aware?
For the sake of our viewers.
So now,
what is important is to understand that in our constitution, the constitution allows that organs of governance operate independently. And this is what we need as a country. Let's allow these organs to operate independently without interference, where if a decision needs to go in a certain direction, someone is coming from the other side to go and influence. That is not good for governance. But you see, governance of a nation dictates that we respect these organs. And this is how we need to move. No wonder when we hear our colleagues crying to say, no, we're being persecuted. We've seen some of them coming out acquitted from the course. We've seen some of them coming out acquitted.
Because there's not enough evidence.
Which is just good. Because then they will have exonerated themselves. Because if it were me, probably, who was influencing them, I would say, even if you don't have the evidence. That's what I was saying. They are operating independent, which is just good for the nation. And they will think we are in the right track.
We are coming to the end of the program.
Yes.
This is a very interesting topic, I understand.
Yeah, sure.
But we are coming to the end of the program. What are your concluding remarks?
For me, I must mention that as a country, we need to have confidence in the organs that report for ourselves. And this country, now that we've got debt being restructured, we hope for many good things to happen. We see many investors coming in. We see relief in the economy. We see our kwacha getting to appreciate. And we see that most of the things, being a land-linked country, if our kwacha does appreciate, we'll be able to get more goods into our country and at a cheaper price, because then we'll have so much money in our country. And going forward, with this CDF that we have, which is 50-something million, which is 20-something million, and we hope that come next year, we are being told the money will be up to over 50 million. With the devolution that we have in place, we'll see many of our constituencies come 2026, we'll have a lot of development. We'll see an example in Lusaka, where in Machero, a grader was bought under CDF. In Mandevu, they got a compactor under CDF, meaning that come next year, many more things are coming their way through CDF. And this devolution is a game changer to this country. So we're in the right direction. Thank you so much.
Mulenga, this is where we have to call it today on the Camnet Breakfast Show, Wednesday edition, governance, policy and politics. And we were having a heated debate pertaining to the debt restructuring and other aspects pertaining to national governance and the ongoing claims pertaining to political persecution, which the governing UPND, including the National Restoration Party, who are part of the UPND Alliance, say it is just the implementation of the rule of law. You too, our dear viewers, we value your support and contribution, and those of you who managed to get through us, we thank you for those phone calls, and those of you who shared your thoughts on our Facebook page, we value your contribution. Let's keep interacting. Remember that we still have another lunchtime show, which is the Lunchtime Cafe with Makokwakozi. And be sure to join us as we bring to you emerging stories and forgotten stories on at the Lunchtime Show. Just now, we have to call it a day. This has been Patrick Soko and Makokwakozi. Keep it on Camnet TV, because Camnet TV is not just another channel.